The knock came before dawn, desperate and sharp. Eli Dawson, a man who hadn't opened his door to a stranger in years, found 3 starving children on his porch. The oldest, a girl with eyes that had seen too much, offered him a bargain, born from the very edge of survival. "We don't cost much, mister," she whispered. Eli Dawson could have closed the door on their suffering and returned to his silence. But he didn't, and that single choice would cost him everything he thought he had left. The knock came before dawn, sharp, hurried, desperate. Not the kind of knock from someone with time to wait. Eli Dawson was halfway into his boots before the second knock hit. He yanked the door open just as the third knock was about to fall. 3 children stood on his porch. The girl in front couldn't have been more than 12, her arms like twigs beneath the sleeves of a man's torn shirt. Her lips were chapped, nose red, dark eyes sunken deep into a dirt-smudged face. Behind her, a boy just younger stood stiffly protectively, his hand gripping the shoulder of a third. A little one small enough to be carried, though no one was doing the carrying now. The wind had picked up in the night, hissing through the gaps in the porch boards, tossing grit against the hem of Eli's coat. He stared at them for a second, trying to make sense of the sight. Then the girl spoke. "We don't cost much, mister." Her voice cracked soft and flat at once, the kind of voice people only used when they'd run out of things to trade. Eli didn't say anything at first. His eyes flicked between the children, bare feet, dirty toes curled against cold wood, the youngest one blinking slowly, like he might fall over if the wind blew too hard. The middle boy was trying not to shiver, jaw locked with pride or stubbornness. The girl spoke again. "You got work, we can work." Eli's hand was still on the door. He should have closed it. He didn't have the room, didn't have the time. The ranch was barely running as it was. Too much land, not enough hands, and damn sure not enough patience for strays. Still, he didn't move. The little one coughed wet from the chest, and the girl flinched at the sound. "My name's Ruth," she said quickly. "That is Jonah." She nodded toward the boy behind her. "And this here's Sam. He don't talk much." Eli looked at Sam. The boy didn't look back. The silence stretched too long. The sun was still hiding behind the ridge. The chill hadn't broken yet. Eli felt it bite through the doorframe and straight into the bones of these kids. "You got folk nearby?" he asked finally. Ruth shook her head. No one left. That answer landed hard. Eli had heard it before. He desat it once himself too many years back to say it out loud. He didn't remember stepping aside. But there he was, and there they were huddling past him into the warm dark of his home, Jonah, guiding Sam with one hand, while Ruth held tight to both of theirs, like she was afraid they'd vanish if she let go. Eli closed the door behind them. The ranch house wasn't much. A single room stretched wide with a loft above fireplace on the far side stove near the center. A cot in the corner, a table with 3 chairs, and the clutter of a man who'd lived alone too long. They didn't comment on the mess, just stood there like they were waiting for permission to breathe. "You hungry?" Eli asked. No one answered, but Ruth nodded once slow. Eli busied himself at the stove, pulling the tin pot off the embers and pouring what was left of yesterday's beans into 3 chipped bowls. Ruth took hers without a word and passed the others down. Sam stared at his food like it might be a trick. Jonah sniffed once before digging in. None of them asked for more. Eli offered anyway. "Where'd you come from?" he asked. Ruth hesitated. Her eyes didn't meet his ill-road town. "Don't think it has a name anymore." "Parents." She didn't flinch, but her hands froze around her bowl. "Gone." Jonah's spoon clinked softly as he stirred what was left in his bowl. He hadn't spoken since they arrived. Eli figured the boy was keeping his words the way some folks kept coins tight and hidden. "Wagon broke axle a week back. You walk all that way, some 'em we rode." That was the first time her voice cracked. Ruth reached over and wiped Sam's mouth with the corner of her sleeve. The boy was already fading his small head, leaning sideways against her. "You can sleep here," Eli said, almost surprising himself. "Just for the night, I'll sort something in the morning." Ruth's gaze lifted. Not quite hope, not quite relief either. Just a slow nod, like she didn't believe in either one. The kids slept near the fire. Ruth curled around Sam like a shield. Jonah just behind her eyes, never closing fully. Eli stayed up later than usual, just watching, trying not to remember a time when 3 other faces had slept on that same floor. Years back, when laughter still echoed through the house, and love hadn't turned to silence. He'd buried that memory with a simple wooden cross and a bottle of rye. But Ruth's voice lingered. "We don't cost much, mister." They didn't ask what happened to his family. Most people did. Ruth didn't. By morning, Sam's cough had worsened. Ruth tried to hush it, pressing a damp cloth against his chest, but the sound cut through the stillness like a blade. Eli didn't say anything. He just poured hot water into a cup mixed in a pinch of ginger and handed it to her without a word. That day he gave Jonah a shovel and pointed him toward the barn. Didn't need much fixing, but the boy worked like it mattered. Ruth swept the porch and then the house without being asked. It wasn't about earning their keep. Eli saw it quick enough. It was about belonging somewhere, if only for a little while. Even Sam tried. He followed Ruth, trailing behind her like a shadow, coughing, but curious, touching things with small tentative fingers. When Eli came in from checking the herd that afternoon, he found Ruth at the stove stirring soup. "You cook?" he asked. "I learned fast." Eli tasted the broth. It was good, better than anything he'd made in weeks. That night the wind picked up again. Jonah stood guard by the window like a soldier. Eli didn't ask why. He already knew. Kids who survived what they had didn't stop checking shadows just because the door was locked. But it wasn't until the third night that everything shifted. Ruth stood on the porch, staring out into the dark. Eli joined her, mug of coffee in hand. "You hear that?" she asked. Eli listened. At first nothing, then a hoarse, distant slow. Eli's stomach sank. No one rode this way without purpose. "You expecting someone?" Ruth asked. "No." She didn't speak again, just stood beside him, shoulders tense. The rider didn't come that night, but by morning fresh tracks led from the ridge toward the eastern trail. A single set of hooves, deep, heavy. Eli rubbed a hand down his jaw. He'd seen those kind of tracks before, government boots or, worse, bounty men. That evening, Jonah came in carrying something wrapped in oilskin. Said he found it tucked behind a rock up near the ridge. Inside was a broken badge. Eli stared at it a long time. Ruth's voice was quiet. "You know what that means, don't you?" Eli nodded. "You lied," he said. She didn't deny it. "We didn't mean harm. Didn't say you did." But he looked at her. Really looked. "You brought it with you. Whatever it is." The silence between them crackled like firewood. Then Sam coughed again, sharper this time. Ruth turned, immediately rushing to him. Eli watched her go, the weight of her secret dragging behind her like a shadow. He'd let ghosts in through his door, and now something worse might be coming after them. Sam didn't wake up until well past dawn. By then, Ruth was already seated on the floor beside him, legs folded beneath her eyes, heavy and unreadable. Her fingers brushed back his damp curls while his chest rose in weak, shallow intervals. His cough had gone quiet, but not in the way Eli liked. Quiet meant something was deeper, now rooted inside like a weed. The air inside the cabin was thick with a strange calm, the kind that settles before something breaks. Outside, the wind was still unnaturally so. Eli checked the porch first thing, scanning the horizon again. The tracks were there, clear and wide still, just one set, which somehow made it worse. A man riding alone wasn't a messenger. A man riding alone was on a mission. Ruth joined him on the porch not long after. She didn't say a word at first, just stood beside him, eyes searching the same ridges. "He was closer last night," she murmured. "I felt it." Eli didn't look at her. He didn't have to. "Why is he following you?" Her hands were wrapped tight around her sleeves, shoulders tense under the oversized shirt. "He's not after me," she said slowly. "He's after Sam." That was the first time she'd said something he hadn't been expecting. Not entirely, anyway. "Why?" he asked. Ruth hesitated. "Because he's not mine. Not really." Eli turned to her now. "Start talking." She didn't flinch under the weight of it, though her lips twitched slightly like she was bracing for pain. "We were living with a woman east of the mountains. Miss Ida took in orphans or sold them, depending who was buying. She called it a home, but it was. It was more like a stable you got fed if someone thought you were worth keeping around. One day this man comes, fancy boots, silver buttons, talks real smooth. Said he was traveling through, but he had papers, government papers." Ruth paused, drawing a deep breath like she had to wade through something sour just to keep going. He saw Sam in the corner. Sam had only been with us a few weeks. Then he didn't talk, didn't smile, but the man he wanted him didn't ask, just took him. She blinked slowly, something dark clouding her expression. I followed 2 towns over. I waited till he was alone, took Sam back while the man was passed out drunk in the saloon. I ran all night, found Jonah the next morning. Eli didn't speak for a while. He just watched her face the stillness behind her eyes. She wasn't crying. He wasn't sure if she still could. "You kidnapped him," he said finally. "I saved him," she said without hesitation. "He studied her a long time, and now that man's coming back." Ruth didn't answer. Sam whimpered softly from inside the house. Eli rubbed a hand down his face. His fingers came away slick with sweat. Even though the air was cold, he'd been in some tight corners before, but this one cut deep. He could turn them out, send them off with food, maybe a horse, let whatever followed catch up somewhere far from his front porch. But Ruth hadn't begged. She hadn't even asked. That made it harder and easier somehow. "You got no idea who the man is?" he asked. Ruth looked down, only a name. She pulled a folded scrap from her boot, creased, filthy edges rubbed soft. She handed it to him without a word. The writing was spidery and faint but legible. "Deputy Marshal Elias, Trenholm Territorial Survey and Child Welfare Division." Eli felt his stomach turn. The name meant something. Not personally, but it meant something. He folded the note and tucked it into his coat. "You should have burned this. I wanted to remember. He'll have jurisdiction. Not if we're not here when he comes." She looked up at him now, and he saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there the night before. Resolve. Ruth wasn't a runaway. She was a storm pretending to be a whisper. "Where would you go?" he asked. She didn't answer. He knew she didn't have one. Inside, Jonah sat at the table, sharpening a rusted kitchen knife against a flat rock like it mattered. Sam was curled up near the hearth, breathing slow. The room felt smaller than it had 2 days ago. Eli stepped back inside, picked up his rifle from beside the door, checked the chamber. Still clean, still loaded. Ruth watched him. "Is that for him?" she asked. "No," Eli replied. "This is for the snakes and coyotes. Whatever's following, you'll get something worse than bullets if he crosses my line." She didn't press. By nightfall, the wind had returned. The sky turned rust-cold clouds, dragging low like claws against the peaks. Jonah refused to sleep, his eyes locked on the window. Ruth sat beside Sam, whispering stories too quiet for Eli to hear. Eli drank coffee thick as tar and stared into the fire. Then just after midnight, the dog barked. He didn't have a dog. Ruth froze. Jonah stood. Eli was already up, rifle in hand, moving quiet across the creaking floor. He didn't rush, just opened the door slowly and stepped out onto the porch. A shape moved just past the tree line, tall, lean horse tethered behind him. The man didn't speak, didn't raise a hand, just stood there like a shadow come alive. Eli raised the rifle halfway. "You lost." The man took 1 step forward. "I'm looking for a girl, maybe 2 and a boy." Eli didn't blink. "Ain't seen any strays." The man took another step. "Government issue, sir. Authorized by court. The boy's not safe without supervision." Eli's jaw ticked. "He's not safe with you." That stopped the man a second. Then he smiled, thin reptilian. "You harboring fugitives, Mr. Dawson." The name meant nothing to him, Eli could tell. "I'll be riding through again in the morning," the man said quietly. "If I find what I'm looking for inside that house, there will be more of us next time." Eli did lower the rifle. "I won't wait for morning." That was all it took. The man turned, boots crunching the frost, a hard ground horse trailing behind him like a dark omen. Eli didn't watch him go, just stepped back inside and shut the door. Ruth was pale. Sam hadn't woken. Jonah stood by the hearth like he'd been turned to stone. "You got till sun up," Eli said. "Pack what you can. I'll saddle the mule." "You're sending us off?" Ruth asked. "No," he said. "I'm taking you out myself. I know the canyon runs places. No lawman will follow unless he's ready to lose his horse and half his teeth." He paused. "After that, I don't know. I do," she said. "We keep moving." Jonah spoke then, his voice small but steady. "We don't want to go." Eli met his eyes. "You don't have much choice, kid." Jonah swallowed hard. "We do now." There was something in his voice that broke Eli a little. Not defiance, trust. Eli turned back to the fire. Then, let's make it count. They rode out before the first light mule creaking underweight, Sam wrapped tight in Ruth's arms, still coughing. Jonah sat behind Eli, quiet as dust. The path he took was old, half swallowed by scrub and brush, but he knew every bend. By midday, they'd cleared the ridge. The air turned thinner, colder. Ruth looked back once, saw nothing but sky, but Eli knew better. They'd only bought time. That night, they camped near a dry wash. No fire, just cold beans and colder thoughts. Ruth huddled close to the boys while Eli watched the moon crawl through the trees. Somewhere far behind them, a match struck. A campfire lit. The man was still coming, and Eli knew then he wouldn't stop. Not until something was broken. Eli Dawson didn't believe in ghosts. But come dawn, the world felt haunted. The sky wore its bruises, low pale blue smeared with ash gray, the kind of morning light that didn't warm anything. They'd camped in a dead riverbed, its banks folded in like the earth had curled into itself and given up. No fire, no noise, just frost-bitten silence. He'd barely slept. The others hadn't either. Ruth had nodded off in spurts, Sam's small body pressed tight to her chest. Jonah sat against a stone like a sentry, eyes red from wind or fear or both. When Eli finally stood stretching out the ache in his knees, neither of them stirred. He didn't need to speak. They felt it too. They weren't ahead of the man anymore. They were being circled. He saddled the mule in quiet, leaving the makeshift bedrolls tucked like bodies behind the boulders. They'd move soon. Too long in one place made them easier to find. But Eli didn't have a destination in mind. Not anymore. He just needed to stay in motion. Like bleeding slowly so the wound wouldn't clot, so the pain wouldn't hit all at once. Halfway through tying the saddle cinch, Ruth stood and crossed to him. She didn't ask anything. She just stared. "What?" Eli muttered. "You've done this before?" she said. He didn't answer. She looked past him toward the path that wound back toward the flatlands. "You keep acting like you're just helping us. Like this is temporary." "It is temporary." "No, it's not. You're already in it." Eli finished the cinch and stepped away. "I told you, Ruth, you had until morning. It's morning now. We keep moving." She didn't argue, but she didn't agree either. They moved in silence, cutting west along the canyon walls where shale broke underfoot like dry bone. Ruth led the mule, one hand always on Sam's back, rocking him as they went. Jonah kept pace behind Eli, slower than the others, but stubborn. The boy didn't ask for breaks, not once. By noon, the wind had changed. Eli stopped without warning, dropped to a crouch, listened. Far off, a crow called, then another sharp triangled. They were talking. He knew that rhythm. He scanned the ridges. They are barely visible. 3 riders moving fast east to west, not toward them yet, just calming. They weren't just being followed, they were being hunted. Eli turned back, his voice low but urgent. "Off the trail now." Ruth obeyed immediately. Jonah hesitated a beat, then scrambled after her. They ducked behind a rise. The mule tugged low beneath a lip of rock and brush. Eli didn't follow them right away. He stood still, watching the dust plume vanish behind the trees. 3 riders meant they weren't dealing with a lone marshal anymore. Trenholm had brought help, or worse, he deputized local men. That meant time was bleeding out fast. He slipped down beside the others, breath tight. "We're not going to outrun them forever," he said quietly. "They've got the horses, the food, the guns." Ruth clutched Sam tighter. Then what Eli didn't answer, but Jonah did. "We fight," the boy whispered. "You got a gun, we've got knives." Eli didn't snap at him. He just looked into those eyes. Frantic, flinty. "You think you can kill a man, Jonah?" The boy's throat bobbed. He didn't answer. Ruth cut in softly. "What are you thinking?" "Eli." He exhaled, slow thinking. "Maybe we stopped running." By nightfall, they'd backtracked half a mile, found a small bend in the canyon where the walls narrowed. Natural choke point, high ground on both sides. Anyone riding through would have to come single file. Eli set the trap in silence. Jonah gathered rocks, sharp, heavy, jagged ones. Ruth pulled strips from an old flour sack to tie them into slings. Eli buried the mule's tack in a dry hole and rubbed ash on the animal's hide to mask scent. Sam had gone eerily quiet again, his breathing shallow. Ruth tucked a warm stone beside him, trying to coax out a flicker of heat. The air didn't feel real, too still, too strained, like the sky was holding its breath. Then around midnight, hoof beat tats. Eli rose from his crouch, motioned to Ruth and Jonah to stay flat. He crept to the edge of the rise and peered down into the narrow. 4 riders, 1 lantern between them, swinging from a saddle horn, the light cut long shadows up the canyon walls. At the front rode the man himself, alias Trenholm, still wearing that silver-buckled coat hat low over his brow, a rifle slung crossways on his back like a predator's tail. The other 3 looked local, leather coats, rawhide gloves. One had a scar that cut down past his jaw like it was melting off. Another chewed something, constantly jaw twitching like a rabid dog. Eli gritted his teeth. Trenholm called out, "Ruth McCullen, I know you're out here." His voice echoed hard off the stone. "You've taken a child from federal care. This is a retrieval, nothing more." Eli pressed the butt of his rifle into his shoulder. Waited. "You're traveling with a known deserter, Jonah Bell military school dropout, runaway threat to himself and others." Jonah flinched beside Ruth. She laid a hand on his arm. Trenholm went on. "And now Mr. Eli Dawson, a wanted man in 2 territories accused of sheltering fugitives and obstructing lawful custody." Eli almost laughed. Trenholm's voice sharpened. "Turn over the boy and I'll forget the rest." Ruth stood. Before Eli could stop her, she stepped out from the rocks, hands high. "I'm here." Trenholm halted his horse. The other men stopped behind him. "Where is the child?" Ruth took another step. "You're not taking him. You don't have a choice." "Yes, I do." She reached behind her and threw something fast, sharp. The slingshot rock struck the lantern dead center. It exploded in a flash of oil and flame. The horses reared. One of the riders fell screaming. Eli fired once, just once, into the canyon wall, and the echo cracked like thunder. The chaos it caused was enough. Jonah scrambled from cover and hurled a stone with all his might. It cracked against one rider's temple. The man slumped. Trenholm fired back blindly, bullets sparking off stone. Eli pulled Ruth down beside him, grabbed Jonah by the shirt, and dragged him back behind cover. The riders scattered, regrouping outside the choke point. One of them shouted, "Marshal, they're up top. You didn't say they had help." Trenholm's voice was ice. "They don't. That's just them." That was all Eli needed to hear. He knew now. Trenholm hadn't brought back up to retrieve a child. He'd brought guns to settle a score. They slipped away under cover of dust and broken noise, leaving the canyon behind. Ruth carried Sam close. Jonah kept watch behind them, holding one of the fallen riders' pistols like it might make a difference. Eli led them into a dried-out mine shaft a mile north, one he hadn't entered in years. It stank of rot and iron, but it was deep, and the way in was narrow, hard to spot, perfect for the night. They sat against the walls, breathing shallow, saying nothing. Finally, Ruth spoke. "He's not just after Sam, is he?" Eli didn't look at her. No. She waited. So did Jonah. Eli wiped his hands on his coat. "I used to run caravans, long rides, freight, sometimes passengers. One time I was hauling a load from THA. 2 kids in the back, scared out of their minds, sold by some school. Parents thought they were dead." His voice went thin. "I got them out. Trenholm was the one who sold them in the first place." Ruth's mouth fell open. "You mean he runs the damn ring," Eli said, or did still might. Jonah sat up straighter. "So this isn't about law." "No, it's about revenge," Ruth swallowed. "You saved those kids, and now I'm paying for it." Later that night, Sam woke up coughing again. But this time it was different. It was wet, gurgled, like something was drowning him from the inside out. Ruth rocked him, panicked. "Eli, something's wrong. He's burning up. He won't stop." Eli rushed over, placed a hand on the boy's chest. It rattled like dry leaves caught in a storm. "Pneumonia," he said, breath tight. Jonah powled. "Is he going to die?" Eli stood abruptly. "He needs medicine. Real medicine." "There's nothing out here," Ruth said. "We're too far." "No," Eli interrupted. "There's one place, Northridge Station, about 20 miles up the pass. Small shack, used to be a mining outpost. The guy who runs it keeps antibiotics trade supply." Ruth gripped his coat, then go. Eli looked at her, then at Sam, then at Jonah. You'll have to hold this place without me. I can shoot, Jonah said quietly. Ruth nodded once. Well, be okay. Eli left before dawn, taking nothing but a canteen, a sidearm, and a piece of Ruth's scarf tied around his wrist. By the time the sun broke over the peaks, he was already a blur on the Rugeline, and Trenholm was already following his trail. But the one thing none of them knew yet was that Sam's fever wasn't the only thing rising. Something else had taken root in that mine shaft, something none of them were ready for, and it was waking up. By the time Eli Dawson reached the bottom of Split Rock Pass, his legs were dead weight. 20 running out behind him, a baby wheezed in a forgotten mine shaft, and Ruth's fingers, grimy cracked, were the last thing holding him to any sense of duty. He should have been numb by now. He was. Every step cracked his bones like firewood, and still he moved. Northridge Station wasn't a town or even a camp. It was a hole in the world. Just a plank shack wedged into a cliffside, run by a half-blind ex-trapper named Mariel Tate, who had a habit of selling off whatever wasn't nailed down for a handful of copper or a scrap of jerky. A man like Mariel didn't ask questions, and right now Eli couldn't afford any answers. The shack appeared just after sunrise. Wood siding worn soft by 1,000 winters, a chimney spitting lazy smoke into the gray sky. The door was half open, no lock, never was. Eli stepped inside. The floor creaked beneath him. Dust shifted. A rifle hung over the hearth. Jars lined a shelf. Medicine preserves, oddments from another time. Then a voice croaky and dry. Don't like visitors this early. Eli didn't flinch. Ain't exactly visiting Mariel. From the back room, the old man shuffled forward, white beard down to his chest, one eye cloudy, the other sharp and narrow. Well, I'll be Eli Dawson. He spat into a tin mug. I figured you was dead or rotting. I'm working on it, Eli said. Mariel eyed him. You didn't come for coffee. What is it? Eli reached into his coat, pulled free. A folded cloth, the scarf Ruth had torn, held it out like a sacred thing. Need antibiotics? Strong ones fast. Mariel squinted. That's a woman's thing. Yours no. He nodded like he already knew. Sick kid. Baby fever's burning high. Chest is rattling. Mariel didn't ask more, just turned shuffling toward the back room. Wait here. 15 minutes later, Eli left with a small tin box wrapped in twine and a warning. Give too much and you'll kill him, Mariel had said. Give too little and he'll die anyway. Eli didn't reply. He just tied the box tight to his belt and turned back toward the canyon wind clawing at his coat like fingers that didn't want him to leave. He didn't notice the fresh boot prints in the snow outside until it was too late. Back at the mine haft, Ruth paced. Sam hadn't opened his eyes in 2 hours. The wheezing had grown shallow. Jonah had soaked a cloth in the melted snow runoff, trying to cool the baby's forehead, but his skin was hot enough to scald. I don't like this, the boy whispered. Ruth knelt beside him. I know. Jonah stared at her, blinking. You think Eli is coming back? Yes, you know he is. She hesitated. No, but I believe it. They sat in silence, listening to the baby's labored breathing echo against the mine walls. Then Ruth heard something else. A grunge footsteps, not Elias. She rose to her feet, heart leaping to her throat. Jonah, hide him. The boy grabbed Sam and crawled behind the old ore cart, pushing blankets and stone over the small body until he was just a lump in the dark. Ruth grabbed the pistol. The entrance to the shaft brightened just slightly as someone stepped through a silhouette, wide-shouldered, broad hat. Not Eli. Trenholm. He didn't speak at first, just looked at her. His eyes adjusted slowly, gleaming in the half-light. Then you always were trouble. Ruth did lower the pistol. You're not taking him. He stepped closer. That baby's a ward of the state. You ain't his mother. No, but I'm the one who held him through the fever. I'm the one who fed him when your people let him starve. You broke the law. I did the right thing. You think the world cares about that, he said, stepping forward. You think a judge will cry over a girl who can't feed herself, who steals a baby, and runs with a half-mad rancher and a half-grown outlaw. Ruth cocked the pistol. Trenholm paused. You won't shoot. You don't know me. I know your file. I know what they did to you in those homes. You're a survivor, not a killer. I wasn't a killer, she whispered, then pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. The pistol jammed. Trenholm smiled. Then he lunged. Jonah saw it all from behind the cart. He saw Trenholm wrestle the gun from Ruth's hand, saw her elbow him hard and tried to run, but the marshal grabbed her by the hair, yanking her back like a rag. Jonah moved. He grabbed the heavy rock he'd been keeping close and burst from cover. He didn't hesitate. He slammed it into Trenholm's knee. The man roared, falling sideways. Ruth kicked free. Jonah screamed as Trenholm grabbed his wrist, but Ruth grabbed the marshal's own pistol from his belt and leveled it. Let go of him. Trenholm froze. He looked up, and for the first time there was a flicker of real fear in his eyes. Go ahead, he said quietly. Do it. Ruth's hand shook. You think I don't know girls like you, he hissed. You want justice, go on, kill me, and leave that baby an orphan all over again. Her finger hovered. Then she dropped the gun. Jonah gasped. What are you doing? I'm not like him, she said. Trenholm laughed. And then bang. The gun in Ruth's hand wasn't the one that fired. It came from the shaft's entrance. Trenholm's eyes widened. Then blood poured from his chest, blooming through his coat like a rose pressed too hard. He dropped. Behind him stood Eli, smoke rising from the revolver. He stepped in, slow eyes on Ruth. You okay? She didn't answer, just collapsed into him, crying without sound. Jonah stared down at Trenholm's body. Is he? Eli nodded. He won't hurt anyone else. But what about the others? Jonah whispered. The writers. Eli's face hardened. They'll come looking, but not tonight. He handed Ruth the medicine tin. Let's save the baby first. The hours that followed were blurry. Ruth mixed the powder into melted snow using a small dropper to feed it into Sam's mouth. The baby didn't stir, didn't cry, but he drank slowly. Jonah held a lantern. His hands never stopped shaking. Eli sat with his back to the mine wall, watching the entrance like it might grow fangs. Time passed. Ruth never left Sam's side. By morning, the fever had broken. The baby breath soft and even. He was alive. And with that breath, something shifted between them all. A thread that could not be cut. Later, when they finally stepped out into the morning sun, Ruth turned to Eli. What now? He looked out across the ridge. We bury Trenholm. We burn the rest. Jonah frowned, and then Eli didn't speak right away. Then we stopped hiding. Ruth raised her eyebrows. What do you mean? I mean, we go where they don't expect. South past the border into no man's land. There's nothing out there. There's freedom. Jonah looked at Sam. And what if they follow us again? Eli met his eyes. Then we make damn sure they don't come back. Ruth didn't smile, but she didn't argue either. They buried Trenholm that evening beneath a pile of stones near the mine. Ruth whispered something the others didn't hear. Jonah dropped a feather on the grave, and Eli lit the fire. He burned the marshal's coat, his badge, his journal. Let the wind take the ashes. Then they turned their backs on the canyon and headed south, unaware of the storm already brewing behind them. Because the man they just killed, he wasn't the worst of it. He was only the gatekeeper. What waited beyond him would break them in ways none of them could imagine. And this time it wouldn't be bullets or boots that shattered Eli Dawson. It would be the truth. They made it 20 men-hours before the wind changed. The air shifted like a warning dry and sour with a bite of dust that made the baby wheeze again. Eli knew that scent, a rider storm, not weathermen. Horses, guns, men who traveled light and fast without kindness. They were being hunted. He didn't say it aloud, but Ruth could read it in the way he stopped speaking, in the way his hand stayed near his hip fingers, brushing the worn leather of his belt where the revolver rested. Jonah noticed it too. Are they coming? They were always coming, Eli muttered. They'd have left the canyon behind with only a handful of supplies. Water, jerky, a few bandages, and whatever Ruth had managed to scourge from the dead marshal's pack. The baby was bundled in blankets wrapped tight against her chest. Jonah clung to her side like a shadow. They didn't ride. There were no horses left, only footsteps on cracked earth, the sky overhead, a relentless stretch of white. It was Ruth who broke the silence. You said we'd head south. Eli nodded. Where there's a place. Used to be a mission. Old Jesuit stone walls built before the war. Now it's nothing but bones and dust, but the well still runs clean. Locals call it Ojo Vio. I went through once when I was 19. Jonah squinted. Is it safe? Eli didn't answer, which meant no, but it was the best they had. That night they made camp in the ruins of a collapsed grain silo. The walls tilted like broken teeth. Ruth sat with her back against the cold stone. The baby curled against her like a second heartbeat. Eli stood outside watching the ridge. The moon was thin. The stars flickered like warning lights. Jonah crept out beside him barefoot on the dirt. You really kill a man back there. Eli didn't look at him. You saw it. Still don't feel real. It shouldn't. Jonah crossed his arms. He was gonna kill us. Doesn't make it easier. They stood in silence. Then Jonah said quieter, You think I'll ever be like you? Eli turned. You don't want to be. I mean strong, brave. You already are. The boy's face twisted. I ran. When Ruth was fighting, I hid. You picked up a rock and swung it at a grown man. You protected your family. You didn't run. But I was scared. So was I. They locked eyes. Jonah blinked fast. Do you think I'm broken like Ruth says she is? Eli crouched, resting a hand on the boy's shoulder. I think you've lived through more pain than most men twice your size. And I think it didn't kill you. That doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're alive. Jonah looked down. Alive hurts. Eli nodded. Yeah, it does. In the morning, the trail narrowed into nothing but wind. The mountains fell away, and the desert opened like a throat-wide dry waiting. Sand ate their footprints before they could look back. By noon, Sam began to cry again. Not loud, just a thin, dry wail like a rusted gate swinging in the wind. Ruth adjusted the blanket. He's burning. Eli felt the baby's forehead. It was fire. Jonah glanced up. Didn't the medicine work? It worked, Eli said. Then why he's starving? They didn't find Ohovo that night. They found a grave instead. A single cross jutting from the sand. No name, just a child's shoe nailed to the wood sun, bleached and cracked. Ruth stared at it for a long time. What kind of people bury kids like that? Eli knelt beside it. The earth was disturbed but shallow. He touched the base, something soft. Not buried, he murmured, just covered. Jonah backed away. Don't touch it. I'm not. Why would someone do this? Ruth asked. Eli didn't answer, but they all knew. Someone had run out of time, out of food, out of mercy. And now with Sam's cries thinning, they were walking the same road. That night Ruth broke. She didn't mean to. It started as a whisper, then a tremble, then it took her whole. She sat near the fireless camp. There wasn't enough wood, rocking the baby in her arms, muttering lullabies that had no melody. Eli came and sat beside her. I don't know what I'm doing, she said. I thought I could save him. I really thought if I held him long enough, fed him whatever scraps I found, he'd live. I thought love would be enough. Eli watched the horizon. Sometimes it is, but not now. He didn't respond. Ruth looked down. He's all bones. He won't make it to morning. Eli's jaw tightened. Yes, he will. How I saw smoke. A trail riders camp about 6 miles south. Could be bandits, could be worse, but they'll have food. Maybe milk. Ruth's eyes widened. You can't just I can and I will. He stood. Jonah tried to follow, but Eli stopped him. You stay. Watch them. If I'm not back in 2 hours, keep heading south. Eli, 2 hours. And then he was gone. Eli didn't remember the last time he ran like that. His lungs burned. His ribs screamed. The sand kicked up into his teeth, choking him. But he didn't stop. He didn't carry a gun, just a knife and a plan he hadn't finished making. When he reached the ridge, he dropped to his belly and crawled the last few yards. The camp was small. 2 tents, 1 mule, a fire low and crackling. 3 men, 1 asleep, 1 cleaning a rifle, 1 humming a tune while boiling something in a tin pot. Milk. Eli's heart hammered. They were talking in low tones. Not English. Border Spanish. Smugglers maybe, or deserters. Didn't matter. He counted to 10. Then he moved. He took the one with the rifle first, slamming the butt of a rock into the back of his neck. The man dropped without a sound. The second spun knife flashing. Eli didn't hesitate. He charged. They grappled near the fire. The knife nicked Eli's side. He head-butted the man, hard-heard cartilage crunch. Then he flipped him into the fire. The scream was animal. The third man bolted from the tent, half-dressed, fumbling for a pistol. Eli grabbed the pot of boiling milk and hurled it. It hit him square in the face. He screamed, clawing at his eyes. Eli knocked him cold with a kick to the chest. It was over in less than 40 seconds. He grabbed the pot still half full in a clean canteen, stole a satchel of bread, a wool blanket, and a tin of powdered formula. Then he ran. By the time he returned, Ruth had stopped crying. She was sitting with Jonah, both of them staring at Sam like they were watching the last leaf fall from a branch. Eli dropped the satchel in front of them. "Heed this slowly." Ruth blinked. How did you?" "No time." She worked quickly, hands steady now. Measured, poured, fed the baby with a makeshift straw made from dried reed grass. Sam stirred, sucked, swallowed, and then a cry sharp alive. Jonah laughed. Ruth sobbed. Eli sat down. Didn't say a word. They reached Ohovo the next night. It wasn't much. Crumbling walls, a dry courtyard, an iron bell rusted into silence. But the well still ran, and there were rooms enough for sleep, for quiet. For once there were no horses chasing them, no gunshots, no snow. Only silence, only breath, only the baby still small, still weak but breathing. They stayed 2 nights, then 3. Jonah found an old harmonica and taught himself one song badly. Ruth bathed the baby in warm well water, humming under her breath. Eli worked in silence, reinforcing the doors, building a signal fire pit, stitching up the tear in his coat. It was almost peace, almost, until the rider came. One man alone, no badge, no rifle, just a horse and a letter. Eli met him at the edge of the courtyard, hand on his hip. The man raised both palms. "Name's Cole. I ain't law, I just deliver." Eli narrowed his eyes. "Deliver what?" The man reached into his coat and pulled free a folded parchment. This, he tossed it. Ruth caught it. Her hands trembled. She unfolded it, read it once, then twice. Eli watched her face collapse. "What is it?" She looked up. They're not after Sam anymore." Eli frowned. "Why?" Her voice broke. "Because he's not missing." Jonah stepped forward. "What does that mean?" Ruth swallowed. "It means they never wanted him back. They just wanted to erase him. Why? Because he's not just any baby." She looked at Eli, her eyes hollow. "He's the governor's son." Eli stared at Ruth like he hadn't heard her right. Then he reached out and took the letter from her trembling fingers, his eyes darting across the script. The ink was ornate, too clean. Government hands had touched this. The seal at the bottom turned his stomach. Executive Order 14C, retrieve or eliminate the infant known as Samuel, product of illicit union between Governor L.S. Mercer and House servant Clara Baines. Use discretion. Eradicate any witness. Eli read it 3 times before folding it slowly. Like if he bent it just right, the meaning would change. Jonah stepped closer, his brows furrowed. "What's a governor?" Ruth turned to him. "He's one of the most powerful men in the territory. Joe lives in the capital, commands armies, controls laws, sends men like the marshal to find people like us." Jonah's voice went small. "Why would a governor have a baby with a servant?" Eli let out a slow breath through his nose. "Because men like that think they can do anything." They sat around the well that night, the baby finally sleeping, after taking in the last of the powdered milk. The stars overhead were sharp enough to cut. Ruth couldn't stop shaking. "I didn't know," she said again. "When Clara came to us, she didn't say names. She just said he couldn't stay where he was. That if anyone found him, they'd kill her, and the baby too. She walked almost 30 minutes barefoot just to find us. I didn't ask why. I just took him." Jonah nodded solemnly. He was hungry. Eli paced in slow circles, fists clenched. He finally looked at the letter again. "He's a bastard born in secret, and now the governor wants him erased, so there's no scandal, no threat to his legacy," Ruth whispered. "So he sends killers, and he'll send more," Eli added. Jonah looked between them. "Then what do we do?" Eli didn't answer, but Ruth did. She stood, chin trembling but spine straight. "We don't run." Eli looked at her. "They'll burn this place to ash if they think he's here." Ruth stepped closer. "So let them come. I'm done running. They killed Ma and Pa. They took everything from us. I won't let them have him too." Her voice cracked. "He's ours now." Eli's eyes locked on hers, and for the first time he didn't look like a man about to bolt. He nodded once. "All right, then we get ready." The next 3 days passed like a heartbeat stretched thin. They turned the old mission into a fortress. Jonah built traps with sticks and wire. Ruth stockpiled what little food remained and fashioned weapons from broom handles and rusted farming tools. Eli reinforced the doors and scouted the ridgelines, counting crows and clouds, watching for dust trails. On the fourth day, they saw them. 5 riders, black coats, brass buttons, not military. Something worse, hired men, the kind who did the work others didn't want to be seen doing. Ruth saw them first. She was feeding the baby when her hands froze. Eli followed her eyes, a faint line of dust winding toward them like a snake. Jonah grabbed his slingshot. 5, Eli said, could be more behind. Ruth's voice was steady. Then we start with 5. They came at dusk. Eli had barricaded the mission gates with broken pews and rusted iron rods. He and Jonah crouched behind overturned stonework rifles trained. Ruth stood upstairs behind a slit window, a bow in hand, old but accurate. The men rode slow, confident. Their leader was clean-shaven, his hat too new, his boots polished despite the ride. He dismounted with a calm smile and called out, "No one needs to die tonight." Eli didn't answer. The man went on, "You've got something that doesn't belong to you. We're here to take him home." Jonah whispered, "He's lying." Eli nodded. "Yeah, and I'm done listening." He fired first. The leader's hat spun off his head and he dove for cover, cursing. The gunfight roared like thunder across the open desert. It didn't last long. The attackers hadn't expected resistance. Eli's bullet clipped one man's shoulder, sent him screaming behind a mule cart. Ruth picked off another from the window, a perfect shot to the thigh, and he collapsed, shrieking. Jonah's slingshot cracked a rider's nose, sending him off his horse in a swirl of dust. 3 down, 2 left, but they regrouped quickly. One began lighting a bottle. Molotov. Eli's eyes widened. Fire! He raised his rifle, but the match had already touched glass. The bottle sailed through the air. Ruth saw it. No time to dodge. She ducked. It shattered against the mission wall and burst into flame. Smoke, heat, screaming, baby. Jonah ran toward the door, but Eli caught him. "Stay down." "But Ruth, I'll get her." Eli charged inside. Smoke thickened the hallways, the fire already crawling across old wood. Ruth was coughing hard, baby wrapped tight against her chest. Eli grabbed a blanket, doused it in water from the well, and threw it over both of them. This way, they barreled through smoke and flame and burst out into the courtyard. Ruth gasping, Sam wailing again, alive. Jonah rushed to them, hugging Ruth hard. Behind them, the wall collapsed. The attackers retreated. Not dead, not captured, but gone. For now. Ruth sat trembling beside the well again, her hands raw and blistered. Jonah held Sam, humming that crooked harmonica tune under his breath to soothe him. Eli stared out into the dark, silent. "They'll be back," Ruth whispered. "I know. With more, I know we won't survive another attack." Eli's jaw tightened. "Then we don't wait for one." She looked up. "What do you mean we take the fight to them?" Ruth blinked. "You want to attack the governor?" "Eli said I want to expose him." Ruth frowned. "Hell, there's a man I know, name S. Ardon Lott. Used to be a newspaper man before the war. Lives in San Bray. Has printing presses, papers, and enemies in high places. You think he'll print the truth?" Eli met her eyes. "I think he's the only one who will." The plan was madness. Travel 200 miles into hostile territory, carrying the most wanted infant in the territory to knock on the door of a broken-down journalist and ask him to take on the governor of the territory. But madness was all they had left. They left the mission that night under cover of clouds. Eli led. Ruth carried Sam. Jonah brought up the rear, watching every shadow. 2 days passed without incident. On the 3rd day, they crossed paths with a man in a wide-brim hat who didn't smile. He saw the baby, raised a brow, then turned to walk. Eli grabbed him. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head. "I could ask the same." Ruth stepped forward, voice firm. "We don't want trouble." The man chuckled. "Well, Miss Trouble's already looking for you." Eli's grip tightened. "Who sent you?" "No one," the man said calmly. "But word spreads. Governor's got a price on the kid's head. Some say $500, some say 1,000. Real bounty hunters are sniffing like dogs." Jonah asked, "Are you one?" The man smiled wider. "Now I'm worse." Eli's hand went for his belt. But the man raised a hand. "Hold, I ain't here for him." "Then why?" The man pointed at Ruth. "I'm here for her." Silence. Even the baby stopped fussing. Eli's voice dropped to a growl. Explain. The man took off his hat, revealing a shock of silver hair. Named Celis Rogue. I knew your father. Ruth froze. You're lying. I'm not. He and I fought together before the war. He saved my life at Hollow Ridge. When I heard what happened to him, I came to pay a debt. Ruth didn't move. What kind of debt? The kind that doesn't die. He reached into his coat. Eli tensed, but Celis only produced a pocketbook, leather worn. He opened it, showing a sketch of Ruth's father smiling in uniform. He said, if anything happened to him, I should find you. Make sure you didn't walk the same bloody path. Ruth's lip quivered. Why now? Because now's when you need someone. Eli didn't relax. How do we know you're telling the truth? Celis looked at him. You don't. He turned to Ruth. But I got a horse, a rifle, and nowhere better to be. You heading to San Bray? Yes. Then I ride with you. They traveled with Celis in uneasy silence. But the old man didn't slow them down. He knew shortcuts, old watering holes, even people who owed him favors. Food became easier to find. So did quiet. Ruth began to trust him. Jonah liked him instantly. Eli watched him like a hawk. 3 days out from San Bray, they stopped at an abandoned chapel. Ruth nursed the baby beneath the broken altar. Celis sharpened a knife. Jonah dozed. Eli sat alone on the steps watching the sun fade. Celis joined him. You don't like me? No. Why? Because I've buried too many men who started as friends. Celis nodded. I ain't asking you to like me, just asking you to trust I want the same thing. Eli looked at him. And what's that? Celis smiled. For that boy to live long enough to forget this. The lights of San Bray appeared like stars on earth. Ruth gasped when she saw them. Eli smiled for the first time in days. They demated. They rode in at dusk. Dust streaked blood-weary hearts hammering. Silas led them through winding streets to an old warehouse where a rusted sign still read, San Bray Times inside. It smelled of ink and ghosts. Arden Lot was older than Eli remembered, gay-bearded, whiskied, and nearly blind in one. But he listened to everything. The baby, the letter, the marshal, the fire. When they finished, he said nothing for a long time. Then he stood. I'll print it. Ruth grabbed his hand. Will anyone believe you? Arden looked at her with fire in his eye. They don't have to believe me. He turned to the printing press. They just have to read it. The press coughed to life with a groan like something half-deaded rising from the grave. Gears creaked, rollers spun, and paper fluttered like the wings of 1,000 caged birds. Eli watched it like he didn't trust it not to explode. Arden Lot hunched over the machining, staining his fingers, sweat already clinging to the folds of his shirt. He looked every bit the man who'd once been dragged out of a courthouse in chains for printing a truth someone didn't like. Now he was doing it again. Headline, Governor's Bastard. The baby they want erased. Below it, Eli's testimony, Ruth's story. The letter names, details, photos, witness accounts. Proof. This will bring fire down on all of us, Arden muttered as the first print rolled out. Not just him. You sure you want to do this? Eli asked. Arden looked up with a tired grin. I've spent 40 years waiting for one more righteous fight. Don't rob me of it now. He slid the page into Eli's hands. The ink was still wet. The baby slept nearby, curled in Jonah's arms, his tiny chest rising and falling as if none of this had anything to do with him. But it did. It all did. By nightfall, Arden's boys were fanning across San Bray, stuffing copies under doors and saloon stools and church pews. A stack made it to the courthouse steps. Another landed in the pocket of a deputy with a guilty conscience. Within hours, whispers began. By dawn, the governor's name was spoken not with fear, but with fury. And just after noon, the governor responded not with words, but with smoke. The first explosion hit a block away. A shop empty, thank God, but loud enough to make every window rattle and every heart leap into their throat. Eli threw open the warehouse door and shouted, "Get down!" The second explosion was closer. They're targeting the press, Arden yelled already, throwing blankets over the stacks of papers. They'll try to bury the story before it can spread. Ruth clutched Sam tighter. What do we do? Jonah looked between them, terrified. Celis cocked his rifle. We stand our ground. Eli was already pulling boards across the doors. Not here. They'll burn this place to the dirt. We move now. But where Ruth cried, Arden stepped forward, eyes wild. I know someone out west of town. Old church turned orphanage. Nuns mostly. They won't talk. Eli didn't hesitate. Lead the way. They moved fast. Ruth carried Sam face veiled. Jonah stayed close to her side. Eli and Celis took the flanks, rifles drawn, scanning every alley. San Bray had become a war zone in minutes. Flames licked the rooftops. Screams echoed from somewhere near the post office. And all around them, people stood frozen in the streets, holding newspapers, reading truths that made them stagger like they'd been shot. The governor had ruled for years with velvet gloves, but now the iron beneath had shone, and people were deciding whether to flinch or fight. The orphanage was quiet, too quiet. Arden led them up a gravel path lined with dead flowers and flaking statues of saints. The old chapel door creaked open, and a woman in a gray habit stood in the doorway. Arden, she said, Sister Mercy, he breathed. We need sanctuary. She looked at Ruth, at Sam, then at the paper in Arden's hand. Without a word, she stepped aside. Downstairs, she said. The wine cellar, go. They huddled in the damp dark as footsteps marched above them. Eli peered through the floorboards. Black boots, more hired men, not soldiers, mercenaries, the kind who'd kill for half the price of a secret. He held his breath. A voice muttered, They're not here, move on. Another checked the press again. If even one page escapes. The door slammed shut. Only then did Ruth exhale. Jonah was shivering, not from cold, from everything. Ruth wrapped her arm around him. They know, he whispered. Everybody knows now about the governor, about Sam. Eli nodded. That's why they're panicking. But what if they find a Celis sitting against a barrel? Didn't open his eyes when he answered. Then we stopped hiding. They didn't sleep. Morning came weak and gray. The town above was a battlefield of rumor and rubble, but something had changed. People were angry, not scared. They had read the truth, and they were choosing to believe it. One by one, deputies quit. Townsfolk began guarding Arden's boys as they distributed more papers. The governor's grip was slipping. But then the governor arrived, not in secret, with trumpets and soldiers and a declaration of treason. From the bell tower, Eli saw him, gold-trimmed coat, white gloves, face as smooth as it was cruel. Governor Ellis Mercer, he rode in on a white horse like he was the savior of a city burning under his own torch. At his side rode Marshal Corwin, alive, burned scars down one cheek, but alive and glaring. Eli's stomach dropped. Ruth clutched Sam tighter. They'll raise the town, Arden whispered. Unless we do something. We already did, Celis muttered. We told the truth. Eli's jaw clenched. But the truth ain't enough anymore. That night, Ruth stood before the church's altar with Sam in her arms. The stained glass shimmered in the candlelight. Should I give him up? She asked softly. Eli stared at her. If I walk into that camp, place him at the governor's feet, maybe this all ends. Maybe no more fires, no more deaths. He'll take him, raise him, or kill him, but it'll be over. Jonah gasped. You can't. I have to think about it, she whispered. For his sake, for yours. Eli stepped closer. No, he didn't yell. Just said it like it was a fact. You hand him over, they win. Not just the governor, every man like him. Every lie they bury, every truth they strangle. She turned to face him. Tears welled in her eyes. I'm tired, Eli. I'm so tired. He nodded. So am I. He took Sam gently into his arms and held him like he'd held his own baby once a lifetime ago. We don't cost much, mister, Ruth whispered, quoting herself. Remember that. I do. She stepped closer. Then prove it. Morning. The city square crowded tense. The governor stood atop a wooden platform. Marshal at his side, his voice carried. Criminals, liars, scum who peddle lies and endanger children. I offered clemency, they refused. He raised a hand. And so justice must be done. 2 soldiers dragged Arden onto the platform. He was beaten, bloody, but smiling. You'll never silence it, he said. It's too late. The governor scowled. Burn him! Ruth screamed from the crowd, but before she could move, a gunshot cracked. The rope above Ardon's head snapped. Then chaos. Eli emerged from the bell tower, rifle smoking. Celices burst from the crowd, cutting a path through soldiers. Ruth ran forward with Sam in her arms, holding him high. "HS, the governor's son," she shouted. "Look at him!" The crowd gasped, then murmured, then roared. People surged. Soldiers hesitated. Even the marshal blinked, and then he turned, faced the governor. "Is it true?" he asked. Mercer's mouth twisted. "I owe no explanations to you." Edward, the marshal, raised his pistol. "You do now," and fired. The shot rang like a bell in a cathedral. Mercer collapsed, a red bloom on his chest. Dead. Silence followed, then cheering and then weeping. From Ruth, from Jonah, from Eli, though he didn't let it show. The city changed that day. So did they. Sam lived. The papers spread across the territory. The governor's crimes exposed. The people chose truth. They chose compassion. And they chose that baby. Months later, Ruth rocked Sam on the porch of a rebuilt mission. Jonah chased lizards in the dust. Eli saddled a horse. "Where you headed?" Ruth asked. "North. There's more folks need help. You'll come back." Eli tipped his hat. "Always." She smiled. "Good cause Sam is going to want to know who taught him to shoot." Eli winked. "Tell him I was taller." As he rode off, Ruth sat with Sam in her lap and whispered to him, "You don't cost much, mister." She kissed his head. "But you're worth everything.